This video is not for someone who has already made up their mind. This is a video for someone who is unsure. Thus, without further ado, let's talk about COVID-19. First, let's talk about what a virus is. And it's actually very, very simple. It is a string of DNA or RNA surrounded by a shell of fat with little spikes of protein surrounding that. They come from nature. They evolve through evolution the same way that a eukaryotic cell, which is what we are made up of, or a prokaryotic cell, which is what bacteria are, they form the same way through evolution, through nature. They're not made in a lab, and they're not, God's spite against anyone. Now, unlike the cells that make up you or me, viruses cannot replicate by themselves. In a sense, they aren't really living because they have to rely on a host cell to make copies of themselves for themselves. When a certain virus finds a certain type of cell, like a lung cell or an immune cell, it hijacks that cell, downloads its DNA or RNA into that cell, and forces it to produce copies of itself. Think of the HIV virus, which focuses immune cells. The virus that causes COVID-19, it focuses on lung cells. They find these cells, they download their DNA into that cell, and then force it to make more of itself. Once the captured cell has made enough copies of the virus, it essentially goes into self-destruct. Its cell membrane falls apart, and all the copies of the virus that it was forced to create get released into the body, and those viruses will then infect new cells. And hand washing is very effective in preventing the spread of viruses. Soap breaks down fat, and since the shell of a virus is made up of mostly fat, the soap will break down that shell and the virus can no longer infect any other cell. And unlike bacteria, viruses cannot be killed through antibiotics. In fact, our most effective means of controlling a virus is through vaccination. So there is a lot of misinformation and controversy about vaccines. So let me tell you how they work. Vaccines work by prepping your immune system before you ever get infected. It's like scoping out the competition before you ever have to compete. Vaccines are typically made from a weakened or broken form of a pathogen that in of itself cannot cause infection. Once this downgraded pathogen has been introduced to the body's immune system recognizes it as foreign and sends antibodies out to fight against it. Think of antibodies as the immune system's foot soldiers. They're the ones that go out, they fight the virus or pathogen and get rid of it. They eliminate it. Vaccines make it so that our immune system will send out the foot soldiers before we ever have to get sick. And an even better thing is that once our immune system has seen this pathogen, has dealt with this pathogen, it will then remember it. So when the real, full, complete pathogen finds its way into our bodies, the immune system can fight it off then and there. Now, as for vaccines causing autism, I have not found a single credible piece of evidence, a single credible article that links autism with vaccines. It seems like that the most likely reason that people will link the two is because around the same age that kids are supposed to be vaccinated is around the same age that they are screened for autism. But that is correlation, not causation. One does not happen because of the other, they just so happen to happen at the same time. Now, on to the hottest of topics right now, COVID-19. And first things first, I'm the realist, but COVID-19, or coronavirus disease 2019, is the disease. And SARS-CoV-2, that is the virus that causes COVID-19. And SARS-CoV-2 stands for Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome Coronavirus 2. Coronaviruses were first discovered in 1965 by Tyrrell and Bino. They isolated a virus from someone's respiratory tract and they named it corona because the spike proteins on the virus's shell were arranged in a way that they looked like a crown. So corona is Latin for crown. The coronavirus looked like it was wearing a crown. And since then, scientists have isolated several coronaviruses and found that 7 of them exist in humans. So oftentimes you'll see HCOV for human coronavirus. And calling the virus that causes COVID-19 the coronavirus is technically not accurate. Corona is a genus of viruses. So think of Homo sapien and Homo neanderthalis. They are 2 separate species, but they are under the same genus of Homo. So we were both humans, but we were of different species. Think of it that way. And this brings me to another point. Yes, coronaviruses have been around since, at least the 1960s when we discovered them, but SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19, has only been around since 2019. It did not exist before then. Thus, we do not have a natural immunity to it. And when I say we, I mean Homo sapiens. The human species as a whole does not have a natural immunity to it. Which means that if you were to catch the virus, you could be asymptomatic and feel fine, or you could catch it and die. And something unique to this particular coronavirus is that even if you are asymptomatic, you could still pass it on to someone else and not know it. That is why mitigation measures such as hand washing, mask wearing, and social distancing is so important, so that people who are asymptomatic and not know that they are carrying the virus cannot spread it to anyone else. But of course, since we royally screwed that up, our next best hope is a COVID-19 vaccine. So let's talk briefly about spike proteins. If you remember earlier, I said that coronaviruses are called corona because the proteins on their shell look like a crown. Well, those proteins are called spike proteins, and they are the pieces that latch onto a healthy lung cell with SARS-CoV-2. Once latched on, that protein acts like a bridge between the inside of the virus, which remember is made up of DNA or RNA, and the inside of the cell. Once that bridge has been made, the virus will then take over the cell and force it to make copies of itself. The Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, instead of presenting the body with a weakened form of SARS-CoV-2, it presents the body with a modified strand of RNA. And this RNA is code for the spike protein, as in it's like a blueprint for how to make the spike protein. And once that code enters into our muscle cells, which is where we get the shot in the arm, the muscle cell will then begin to produce that spike protein, and only the spike protein. It does not create a new version of the virus. It does not, create some weird mutant virus human thing. It only creates that spike protein. Once that spike protein leaves the cell and enters into the body, our immune system recognizes it as foreign, and remember, it sends its foot soldiers out to attack it. That way, when the real SARS-CoV-2 virus shows up, the body has already seen it, it knows how to handle it. And this technology is nothing new. RNA was first And this technology is nothing new. Modified RNA was first proposed, as a therapeutic in 1989. And after you get one of these vaccines, getting side effects is actually a good thing. It's a sign that your body's immune system that they're sending out these antibodies. They're sending out these foot soldiers to fight against the virus, to fight against the spike protein. And whenever I got my first dose of the Moderna vaccine, my arm was kind of sore. I was kind of tired the day after. That's good. That's perfectly normal. That's fine. And if your body is not showing symptoms, that's also fine. Everyone's body is different. Everyone's immune system is different. You're good. And another important thing, I know I keep saying everything is important, but another important thing is all the sources that I found talking about mRNA vaccines or the vaccines in general, which I will be leaving in the description below, they state that these vaccines are safe and effective. Now, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, that is not an mRNA vaccine, that is a adenovirus vaccine, and I tried to do research into what that was and what that meant. That was unfortunately beyond what I could fully understand. So I'm just not confident enough to talk about that vaccine right now. This is the part that I think is going to irritate a lot of people. At the very least, it's going to be one of the first two parts that's going to irritate a lot of people. Because we're talking about herd immunity, we're talking about getting vaccinated to protect from the virus, but there are some things that I want to first clear up and make sure that we are all on the same page. So, herd immunity is the indirect protection from infection conferred to susceptible individuals when a sufficiently large proportion of immune individuals exist in a population. It is essentially the scaling of an individual's immunity to that of a population. And it is important so that those who cannot be vaccinated for whatever reason are protected against the virus. And this works in a population with herd immunity because a pathogen that has successfully been vaccinated against has too few people to spread to, and thus it can't spread. If a pathogen has no one to infect, it cannot spread. And reaching herd immunity through natural infection with the COVID-19 infection could potentially mean the death of, and this is a quote from that same article, could mean the death of 30 million people worldwide. Think about that. 30 million people. So basically, that's like the whole population of Canada dying just to produce herd immunity. And think about the strain that would have on local health systems. So 30 million people are dead, but without the proper health infrastructure to take care of the people who survive or to take care of the people who have some other ailment besides COVID-19, think about the number of deaths that we could have on top of that, not just from COVID. And so, in my informed opinion, reaching herd immunity through vaccination is the most ethical option. And Aschwanden, and I probably said that incorrectly, in their 2020 article published by Nature, they suggest that the threshold for reaching herd immunity for COVID-19 is around 60 to 70% of the US population. And that's only an estimate. So it could be lower, it could be higher. But just in case it's higher, we need as many people vaccinated as absolutely possible. Now, in these closing thoughts, I'm going to be very honest with you. This is opinion territory, but it's opinion based upon the research that I just presented you. Everyone needs to get vaccinated. It does not matter if you are young and healthy or if you are old and stubborn. The only way we're going to end this pandemic with the fewest number of lives lost is through herd immunity by vaccinating everyone. And if you don't care about your health and safety, at the very least, care about the health and safety of someone else, of someone who cannot get vaccinated, whether they have HIV, are going through chemotherapy, or young children. Think about them. Because just because I personally am young and healthy and, say that I wasn't vaccinated, just because I get sick and I survive it, imagine the number of people I could spread that to who don't have a strong immune system or who have not been vaccinated. Imagine what my one single individual could do to someone who doesn't have any protection. And so because of that, in my, again, informed opinion, choosing not to get vaccinated is your choice, but it is a very selfish one. So thank you for watching my first video. I know it's very bold of me to say first because that suggests that I will then have a second and a third, but thank you for watching. Again, this video is not for someone who has already made up their mind about not getting vaccinated. If you've already made up their mind, it's not worth my time or energy to try and change it. This is for someone who's unsure. And the links in the description, the research articles, the YouTube videos down below, those are just a starting point. So if you want to know more information, follow those links, ask your doctor, and, do some research. And, yeah, hopefully next time I see you, I will be talking about language and inequality. So yeah, until next time.